the latest episode of the Lance Burkitt Encounter. Today I thought I'd bring this to you by text because all you do now is look on that little screen and text. You don't communicate, you don't look out, you're just looking in. So all you're going to get from me today is this silly robotic voice and some text on the screen. Joking.
I do apologise for that rather different introduction there, folks. I thought, given that this episode's all about communication and lack of it, really, I thought I'd start off and just see how you reacted to a little automation, a little bit of bot, a little bit of non-audio visual communication from a human being, because really that's what I wanted to talk about today. And by communication I mean human beings being social, interactive things, and how we kind of are getting away from that as a species, or are being steered away from that as a species. So I wanted to really get into that and look at how it affects us just as humans and also as photographers, because in my opinion, looking at photography that you see around, much of it now has lost its the reason for it. The communication's gone out of photography. You see some very nice pictures, but you don't quite know what they mean or what they're trying to say or what they're for. AI has a lot to do with that. The big part to play in that is that a lot of stuff's AI or AI completed at least, which doesn't help the kind of the point or the reason for the photo shoot in the first place. And I think, and particularly when you're shooting portraits like the ones you see around me here, and when I say communication, I mean the interaction between the photographer and the sitter is key to whatever you get out of the photo shoot. And I guess this might have been tried in some form before, but during lockdown, when freelancers and particularly people who depended on photo shoots for their income hit upon the idea of doing remote photo shoots, online shoots, whatever you call them. And I didn't understand it, because for me, making a portrait or a fashion shot or anything where you're communicating a thing, a concept, just a portrait where you've got a link with that person, how you could do it over an internet connection, not holding the camera, not looking into the lens, staring across some video screen, never kind of sat well with me. Now I get why people did it. They need some money to make money here. That's great, and it's probably an ingenious way of doing that, making money. But I think that was the start of much of the drivel we see around nowadays. And I noticed, doing a bit more research into this today, see how much of it is still going on, and there's lots of it going on. You can actually get apps that will assist you and do a virtual photo shoot, and I just think it's part of a wider kind of con to get people to stop communicating and stop being in the room with each other. And I noticed some fairly prominent photographers doing it during those, conned lockdowns and horrendous way we were trapped for a couple of years, and people just trying to figure out how to make money, which I get. But I've seen some examples of piping in a photographer from the other side of the world when the local photographer could do the job just as good, just because they could do it remotely. And how that works, I don't know, because I know from teaching a lot over video, to teaching in a room with people, to conversing in a room with models, actors, other clients, that the communication bit that makes the end photograph work will be missing, because you haven't developed that relationship, which is key to having the communication work. And an example where that might be, let me find a photograph of mine out here. I'll go one from a few years. I just took this one out earlier. This one is a great young lady called Rachel, who was a model and an actor and a singer, actually a very good singer. And this must be nearly 15, 16 years ago, maybe even more, this shot. And through working with Rachel and communicating in the room on the day, we were able to get to a set of pictures where we were showing her lighter side, her performing side. She was just kind of like hanging about, hanging loose, rehearsing, thinking about songs, getting practice in for when she gets on stage. And I just wanted her to be herself and just come across as in being approachable. And I think she does that on this set. I think she really did kind of give me that. I'll pretend I'm on stage and I'll pretend to be my stage persona. But it was only me talking to her and getting that feeling, that rapport. This was the first time we'd worked together. And I always try and spend maybe 20 minutes, half an hour before we shoot anything, getting to know the person. You know, where you're from, what you do, how long you've been modelling, what do you like to do as a model, what are your favourite things to do. Trying to get them to relax and to feel comfortable to be with me in a room. Because it must be quite daunting for a young female or even a young male that's not that experienced to come into an empty room with a photographer they don't know and be asked to do loads of different things from a modelling, acting, performing perspective. So you got to build a rapport. So person is relaxed with you, because if you don't, that will come across on the shots. Definitely comes across on the shots. But more importantly than that, they won't get into character. They won't become them, their acting selves, that person they're pretending to be in that shot without being relaxed and comfortable. So the idea of me doing that over a video call and then perhaps not even taking the shot because the model, the other end's using the camera and taking the shot, I failed to see how that links with good communication or usable communication. And I think that's quite obvious in a lot of those shots, if not all of them, where it's been done remotely. The key is communication, and I guess likability is a thing as well. Because if the model doesn't like you, or doesn't feel confident around you, you're going to get nothing. You're going to get stonewall face. And Rachel was just an absolute blast to work with. And she did everything that I needed and more. And I believed in her performance. I believed that's who she was. And I've since worked with Rachel a handful of times since, and she really can perform to camera. But I think if we hadn't have had that kind of connection that day, she hadn't trusted me, we hadn't liked each other, she hadn't felt like she could just be her real self on camera, we don't get those natural vibey shots. We don't get the eye contact. She means that when she's looking at me and she's singing. She actually means that. I think those kind of things are key in communication in photography, and I think a lot of photographers are losing those key skills. Because as a society we're being kind of nurtured and pushed down a road where everything can be done remotely and everything's done in a withdrawn way. And humans are social animals. I'm not so much now. I'm getting older. I'm a miserable old git. I like to, hang out with my wife and just not socialise that much. But working and socialising at work, working with a team at work, working in a photo shoot at work, in a space, in an environment where you can feel the vibe, where you understand each other, where you can work each other out, produces a much more honest end product, whatever it is, than doing it remotely. And society is pushing us down a remote pathway, and people are liking it because they have to move less, they get less time travelling, they're more control over their daily life, they can be at home more with their kids and their animals and stuff. But I think I've been guilty of this somewhat as well, being sucked into that communication via digital, and it's killing the function of society, but it's also within that killing the function of creativity and communicating with each other in such a way that it's contrived and it's loose and it's meaningless and it's also kind of like watered down, as in an example would be, you can't say that, you don't use that word, don't say this, don't say that. Now, I'm not talking about not being an horrible twat to people, I'm not talking about not being awful, but you can't say that oh, don't use that word. All that does is waters down language. And we're predominantly verbal animals. We talk to each other, we listen. We're supposed to listen. If we're not using words because we don't want to upset anybody, we're not communicating properly. We're not communicating our true feelings. We're not communicating what we really mean. If we say, oh, it's grey, when really it's black, because we don't want to say black because somebody might be offended, then we haven't communicated the truth. So how can that person then respond to the truth and give you their truth? If you're all watering down your opinions and what you think because you're a bit scared of offending people, you might as well not. And when people are communicating via text or email, they do tend to water things down and not use words because they might, that word's it's proof. They said it if it's in a word. If it's in an email or text, it's proof. Some people are self-censoring, and the frustrations I feel as a photographer that we're stopping to communicate and we've forgotten how to communicate. And if we don't right that wrong somehow soon, quickly, photography will be more dead than I think it already is. Start to listen. Don't just hear people, listen to them and respond to them. Stop just looking at things but not seeing them, because photography particularly is about that kind of communication. Stop and look at the photograph. Even if it's on your phone or your laptop, look at it, really look at it, see what's there. Have a think about what the communication is. What is it trying to say to you? And if you do that and spend a bit of time doing that, you'll see that when a photographer gets it right, when the subject gets it right, whether it's a model, actor, bottle of pop, whether it's a hillside, whether it's a look at me in the city, if we get it right, and we're not doing it virtually, it can speak to you quite deeply. And that's what photography is all about. Seeing, not viewing. And there's that old book, isn't there, in that TV series by John Berger, Ways of Seeing, Ways of Interpreting Art and Photography. Dig it out, have a look, have a listen. That'll wake you up and show you what's going wrong currently. And I'm going to make a conscious effort to try and stop being so distracted by that fucking thing there. It's difficult. I'm as addicted as you, but I think we can peace out from it and just relax, look around more, involve ourselves with people more, then I think we can quickly become better communicators again. And by better communicators, I mean better humans. Look after each other better. Pay more attention to each other. Listen to people. See each other. See the work. Get in a room. Make some great photographs. Don't do it online. If you think that there's a really good online photograph being taken out there where somebody's worked remotely and done it online, show it me. Because I'm yet to see it. And today, following a conversation I had before Easter with a colleague of mine, where we were talking about how most people we come across in life are NPCs or appear to be NPCs. And for those that don't know what an NPC is, it's like a bit of gaming jargon. It means non-player character. It's those characters you see in games that are just randomly hanging around to kind of like make a scene look like it's got people happening in it. And when you observe people in life, either at work or in the street or on holiday, when you actually sit and observe people, you quickly begin to notice that there's not a lot going on with that person. They're very insular, very almost as if they are just there to make up the numbers. And I don't want to slag anybody off or say, there's anything wrong with keeping your head down and just making up the numbers, but it makes me think, it certainly made me and my colleague think, what's the point in them? So we had a 20-minute conversation about that, about how there's so many NPCs in our lives and how they seem to add little quality to the world. They don't seem to contribute much other than taxes, and taxes is another con altogether, isn't it? But it was just saying that, I think once you become aware, and maybe this comes down to how you're involved with life, what you think about life. For me, being a proponent of, or a believer of, the simulation theory, where I believe that we live in a simulation. And when you come at it from that angle, if you look at it in terms of gaming's a simulation we've made, it's not real. But perhaps to the characters in it, it is. And these characters have been made up to fulfill a role, hanging around near a bridge, baking some bread, contributing in their little way. But they don't really contribute to the wider game. It's you as the player, or you and your friend, the characters, or the players that contribute to the game. And I think when you look at it from a holographic or simulated reality perspective, it's really easy to see, I think, what's going on. And the world is full of NPCs in every walk of life, from the higher echelons of power down to football and sport, down to music, down to, you know, the guy that builds your house or your estate for you, down to people who sell you your phone in a phone store. So we had this big conversation, quite a funny conversation. Not trying to disrespect anybody, but just, you know, funnily enough, we're both quite, I don't know if awake's the right word. It's a bit of awake sounds a bit arrogant, doesn't it? But I've always felt like I was kind of looking at life almost like an outsider looking in, observing situations and things and people from being no age. That's how I've always felt, like almost like I'm in the wrong room. And my colleague I was speaking to, he's very similar to that. He's very, very the wrong guy in the room. And so maybe people that are wired like us, or that are characters, can spot this more easily or are more aware of it because we've always felt it, and it's the way in the simulation we live in that we've been designed to be. And I can live with that. If there's some alien or some other entity out there written the script and controlling it, I'm happy with that. I'm living my life. I'll go along with it. When I wrote my paper, The Death of the Mechanical Photograph, in 2018, I spoke about then how, when I was beginning to realise through research that we probably do live in a simulation, how did I equate that to my feelings about my wife, my kids, my mum and my sister who died? Did they never actually live? Are they just things? And then, you know, so at the time I was a little bit, you know, conflicted about how I felt. But since then, and since, you know, kind of thinking about the simulated reality I believe we live in, it doesn't matter whether it's flesh and blood real or whether that's just how things manifest in this reality, because it still happened in this reality. I still experienced it in this reality. So things are quite still real, you know, in terms of how we feel and think about them. So this conversation went on, and we were laughing and joking and talking about people we clearly thought were NPCs. And what it did is it got me thinking about photography and about how in the world of photography, NPCs are everywhere. And I don't just mean NPCs in the world that we're photographing. I mean photographers are pretty much all NPCs themselves. We see some photographers and other creatives. You can apply this to musicians and everything. There's a distinct lack of originality. They follow trends. They try and get down with the latest thing. They're like little soldiers just scurrying along, doing what they think's the in thing to do, to be loved and to be worshipped, but never really contribute anything of substance, anything new, anything sideways, anything that smacks you in the face and makes you go, fucking hell, that's really good. Boringly going through life taking pictures as a non-player character is not me, and I'm acutely aware of that, and I'm forever battering myself, as you'll know if you followed the podcast for any amount of time. You'll know that I'm guilty as anybody, trying to get out of my comfort zone. But most of the photographers you see out there, the NPCs, are stuck in the comfort zone, have no desire to get out of the comfort zone. It's just comfort zone city for them. Some of it makes me chuckle a little bit, because I think if we are scripted, if we are living in a predetermined reality where all our decisions are made for us, then clearly that means you're not responsible for anything you do. And I've always kind of like wrestled with that. I don't quite want to live in a world where I can sit here and go left, right, left, right, left, right. Oh, right, I'm going left. No, I'm not going right. none of that was my decision, it was somebody else's. I always struggle with that. There might be some truth in that, there might not be. But I think just because you're an NPC, does that mean you can't break out of that programming? One of my favourite TV shows of all time, Red Dwarf, with Rob Llewellyn, Craig Charles, Chris Barry, Danny John Jules, Norm Lovett, Ashley Airage, all them. Doug, who writes it, they're just, I mean, it's just genius. But one of the things in that is he talks about reality and Crichton the Mechano trying to break out of his programming, the whole thing. I think, why not? But I guess first thing you got to do is have somebody point out to you that you're possibly an NPC, or realise it yourself. And I don't know whether you can realise that yourself if you are a true NPC. So I started looking. I had this discussion before Easter with a colleague, and then I've been away to Greece. I had a lovely week in Greece with Kirsty. I mean, how I spent 51 years, not being bothered about travelling the world and seeing places. The last 20 as a photographer kind of astounds me, because once Kirsty had said to me, look, get your shit together, either get over this fear of flying or I'll fuck off on my own and leave you. Made me go, I best get out of this fear of flying then. And then I go and sit down, Kirsty goes to look out the lookout view, and I go and sit down on a rock and just take it in for a minute. And then I'm just instantly put back in the game, and I'm looking at my mission to come and photograph this building over 50 years is ruined because the whole fucking landscape is full of NPCs. And that's all I could think from this point on. It's just fucking NPCs. All I can see are NPCs everywhere. And it kind of didn't ruin the experience for me, but it ruined the photographic experience of me, because I thought, I read before, I did a bit of research before I went, just to check what local laws are for, photographing monuments and people and street photography and all, just make sure I wasn't going to get arrested. And it turns out if you want to photograph anything commercially on the Acropolis, you've got to get permission and permits and all that. So I get also why you want to know that, because you want to come up when there's no fucker else there. Because unless you're going to filter your shot to get to death and have, 3-minute exposure so you can't see anybody milling about, you're pretty much stuck with postcards. You know what I mean? I was spurred on last week to think about this, and it came off the back of me looking at competitions, and I'm going to do a podcast episode over the next couple of weeks about calls for entry and the horrendous amounts of rip-off competitions there are for people, and also how the good ones are very, what's the phrase, snobbish, very elitist, and exclude many working class photographers, but that's for another day. But whilst I was looking for that, I kept coming across the phrases like master photographer and genius photographer, and statements like, they're so above other photographers and they're living, and I just think, what a lot of fucking shit. I know some photographers who will outmaster most of the masters, the supposed masters, but you've never heard of them. They got 30 followers on Instagram because they just take pictures for the love of doing it and the craft of doing it. So when I hear the regular names, some of the names, I mean, I'm going to slag anybody off, they're good photographers, but master photographer, come on. Most of the masters of photographers who are purported to be masters are so sucked into one genre or one area. Anybody, if you're doing something that niche for that many years, should become fucking good at it, and if you haven't. But master, I think the amount of master photographers that's purported to be across the world on all continents from all backgrounds is just bullshit. There are some photographers who have got more experience, who do what you call high level quality work that's repeatable, but masters, come on. So today I wanted to talk about that, and kind of I've kind of realised over the years that these kind of the people that live in that kind of terminology come into two categories. And before I get into that, I just wanted to talk about, I was reminded recently of a saying, those who can do and those who can't teach. And that makes my fucking teeth itch. It makes me want to grab whoever said it and shake them by the neck, because it's aimed at photographers and creatives, artists, fashion designers. It's aimed at people in the creative industries a lot. And also I've heard it spoken about, most of mechanics and engineers, where there's some kind of, I guess it aligns with the master photographer. If you don't make it in the public eye as a photographer, then you've not attained true status and you must go off and teach. But it's a load of bollocks, because me as a teacher, I started teaching while I was still working as a full-time photographer, and I did it because I enjoyed doing it. I can't stop talking, you might have guessed. I can't stop telling people how to improve, learn new stuff. That's how I became a teacher. Not because I was crap at photography, not because I couldn't get any work as a photographer, but because I enjoyed doing it. And most people I've come across get into teaching for the same reasons. There's occasionally a little bit of, there's not a lot of freelance work in areas where they live, or there's not a lot of jobs in the areas where they live, so they diversify and become teachers. But they can only be fucking teachers because they were damn good at what they were doing in whatever walk of life it was. You can't really teach photography to the level that's expected, whether you're doing it as a tutor, freelance, or whether you're doing it in a college or a school or a particular university, and not know what the fuck you're talking about. So, winding back a bit, that saying of, those who can do and those who can't teach, just fuck off. Go look in the mirror, give yourself a good hard look, then slap yourself round the face and fuck off. Because most, if not all of the teachers I know, particularly in the creative arts, can fucking really do what they're doing. And that's why they're employed as teachers, and that's why they keep teaching for years. Not because they can't do it, because the ones who can't do it get found out pretty fucking quickly. In fact, students are the best for finding out people who don't know what they're talking about. They will find you out, particularly college educated. In the UK, that's like 16 to 18s, and then university level, which is 18 upwards. Those kids, they'll find you out and crucify you. If you don't know what you're talking about, you're done in 5 minutes. So, aligning that with master photographers, most teachers I've come across, not just teachers as well, technicians, photography technicians, have to be fucking good. Otherwise, you're found out and you're done. So if you do hear anybody saying anything like that, anything derogatory about photographers, and they only teach because they can't do it, whoever said it, tell them to go and have a good look in the mirror, have a look at their own work, and then tell them to fuck off. So masters of photography, the myth. There's two schools, or two types of people. Am I saying that right? There's two kinds of people that I come across that live in that world, and they're the ones they're your regular photographer who's attained a certain level of success, maybe gets semi-regular publications, or even really regular publications, might have won the odd competition, gets a couple of front covers, suddenly touted as a master photographer. And more often than not, they're in a niche, they live in a little pocket. And then there's the other types, who are the ones who predominantly, I think, frequent internet forums and that kind of world, where they spend their whole lives sucking up to the people who they see as being great geniuses, masters of photography, and spend their whole time trying to build everybody up to want to be like them, creating a little niche flow, so everybody goes, oh, I want to be Steve McCurry, oh, I want to be Ansel Adams, oh, I want to be David Bailey. And they spend that much time trying to do that, they never achieve fuck all. They never get their own style, they're just photocopying, and becoming very stale and very boring and very mediocre and very samey. And it stops people trying to be themselves. And I've said this on other podcasts, that if you're not going to be yourself, why bother? I mean, it's one thing to be influenced by somebody, but it's another thing to want to be them. And I often think that actors must find it really difficult, because we all have our favourite actors, our favourite singers, our favourite everything. But as an actor, if you're inspired by someone as an actor, you've got to be very, very careful you don't start mimicking them. Imagine, I don't know, let's say I'm a big guy, I become an actor, I go to auditions, and Jack Black's my favourite actor. I've got to be very careful not to start acting like Jack Black and having his mannerisms and his approach. And it's the same for photography, it's the same for any art form. I've said a million times in this podcast, David Bailey is probably my favourite photographer. And you can see in my work I've been influenced by him. In fact, I'm going to do a podcast probably next week about top 5 photographers that I think are the top 5 photographers, and Bailey will be in that. And you can see my influences from David Bailey in my work. But more than that, it's his approach that excites me. But I haven't become David Bailey. I haven't started talking with a Cockney accent. I haven't started being really harsh to people. I haven't started being too honest, although some people do say I'm quite honest. Every photograph I do, I'm not trying to make it look like a David Bailey photograph. I'm trying to make it look like a Lance Burkitt inspired by photograph. And all these two kind of sections of people, the suckers of the masters and the ones trying to get people to be like the masters, or you can't be any good unless you look like that, they would end up probably walking, talking, thinking, acting like David Bailey because they think that's going to make them as popular. And inspiration shouldn't be about that. It shouldn't, should it? It's actually quite strange, isn't it? Because music, we get cover versions of famous songs, and sometimes, depending on your opinion, they might be better. Very rarely. But in photography, if you copy somebody that closely, you get called a thief. And it's a different medium, I know, but it's a strange one, isn't it? So, a Richard Avedon portrait, Davima with elephants, let's say. When Rankin attempted to copy that for his, what was it called, 7 images that changed fashion or whatever he did, which was awful. And the model he used, what's it called, Erin, I'll put that on the screen, I can't remember. Lovely, great model, very similar to Vima, but fucking terrible picture. And that, I think, came about because of the awe-inspired Richard Avedon shot he was trying to copy. They got nowhere close to. In fact, the whole set he did ranking on the 7 images. I think it was called the 7 images that changed fashion. Might have been a BBC thing in the mid 2000s. He got nowhere close on any of them. The one in the French Street, I think, was probably about the closest one. I can't remember. It was photographed at work. Might have been. Who was it? Wasn't Brits, was it? But anyway, trying to copy is a dead end for creatives. Unless you're a musician, then you can copy, put your own slant on it and get away with it. Make millions, it seems. Photography doesn't quite work that way. Well, for me and for most people in this day and age, success is getting out of the fucking bed in the morning and doing something. And going to bed at night, surviving. That's success. But success as a photographer depends how you measure it. I'll go through that on another podcast. But really, you stop trying to be the best, you're trying to be yourself and be the best self you can be as a photographer. Create the best work you can do as a photographer. That's where the real mastery is. You'll become a genius in your own work if you do those things and create that output. Take your influences, put your own feelings, capacities, knowing into that, understand narratives, have a workflow, which means that your pictures look how you envisage them, so you can repeat it. It adds to your style, it adds to your worth. People buy into that, and you're not remotely interested in being the next him, the next her, the next Diane Arbus, the next, I don't know, whoever it is. You're just not interested, because all you're interested in is sucking in everything that the reality we live in has to offer you, mixing it up in your head, putting your own feelings, your own thoughts, your own vibe onto it, mixing it up, making it, editing it, putting it out to a great standard because you've done all that, and keep going. And then learn some more, and put that learning into your craft, and then go again. The minute you stop learning, the minute in your head you're a master, the minute you're sitting there going, I've mastered this photography, look, I'm a master now, is the day your work will go straight back down to where it started. It'll become flat, become boring, become arrogant, it'll become, anybody can do that. Because if there are any true masters out there, which they're not, but those purported to be them, those who carry on putting good work out, who always seem to do good work, are doing that because they're learning. They're not learning I don't mean they're learning how to use a shutter. I mean they're learning about craft, about life, about process, about narrative, about themselves, about the people around them, about the stories they're trying to tell. They're always learning. The minute you stop learning is the minute that you might as well put your camera down, because you're only going to churn out. You're going to become a photocopier from that point on. Uncanny Valley. So I was watching an episode of my favourite podcast, The Y-Files, recently, and it's from a year or so back, I think, the actual episode, where AJ and the fish, Mr. Hecklefish, talk about the Uncanny Valley and how that relates to humans being able to spot when something is, particularly other human things, robots, cartoons, become too human-like, and the brain goes, no, can't compute. And as I was watching the episode, as always with the Y-Files, really in depth and, very educational, if you like, I started to think to myself, this happens in photography, and although it's not really called Uncanny Valley, by the way, means Google it and find out. But it's when the brain can no longer accept that a robot or a pretend human face, a doll or a cartoon, starts to look too human, and the brain starts to conflict, can't compute. And I thought to myself, that just really strikes me as a photographic thing as well, because the human eye, not even the human eye stroke brain, the process that we have to detect images, can tell, even to the untrained eye, can tell when it's not real, not right. And even my wife, who was not a photographer, over years of listening to me and watching films and watching TV, can now go, oh my God, look at the green screen. Oh my God, as if a sunset's that colour. And the Uncanny Valley thing, for me, directly links to photography and photographic brain-eye coordination, because when a human eye stroke brain combination sees a landscape that's clearly what we might call over-edited to no longer look real, the human brain sees that quite easily. And around, I don't know, I guess it must probably best part of 20 years now, maybe 15 years, there's a big influx of HDR photography, high dynamic range, where there was a big explosion on places like 500px and probably what they call it as well, other god-awful bloody website. What's it called? Used to have to have a Yahoo email login to get into it, where people are uploading their overly saturated, overly edited, overly fake images through a HDR process. Not so much shooting in camera HDR, but using Photoshop as a HDR process, and creating god-awful photographs, which they pass off as being edited really well, or look at it, oh wow. But the human eye is going, what the hell? No, I'm not having that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that today, about my experience of over-editing, over-saturating, and there are some culprits in photography. I'm not going to name names, you know me guys, I never name names, but there are some culprits in photography who can't help but just bloody make that shit. And you're just talking to them, you're not staring at them. Try and keep it, make it look like it would do if you were just talking to them, not staring at them, and you won't go too far wrong. And just don't over-edit. And a good rule of thumb is to edit it, leave it for a few hours or even a day if you can. Come back at it and look at it with fresh eyes, because your fresh eyes will make you go, holy shit, I've overcooked that. And fresh eyes are everything for photographers. So that's pretty much all I would do from a retouch perspective, unless the client said, can you get rid of all those highlights? Now, I'll go through that on another video, but you can soon become very uncanny. And what I wanted to do today was just make you aware of how easy it is to come into the Uncanny Valley arena, and try and steer you away from that. I'm just going to do a real quick, just made them into one layer. I'm just going to do a real quick kind of tutorial, if you like, on what might happen from here. So a client might go, can you get rid of all those highlights? So yeah, we can get rid of all the highlights. We can make them all go away. If that's what you want, client, we can pretty quickly, you know, get rid of any hint of humanity from the lovely Evie's face. Overcook that a little bit, but it won't matter, will it? Because client doesn't care anyway. Like so, and just make sure that she, yeah, that's it. Oh, we're happy. Oh, yeah, you've given a real defined jawline there, Lance. Let's have a bit more of that. Let's do a little bit more. Let's have a bit more definition on that jawline. Oh, yeah, that's brilliant. A little bit more highlight on her face, just up there. Just bring a high. Oh my God, yeah, that's it. Yes, I'm exaggerating, but I've had this before from clients, and can you see that? This is what happens when people start to overcook edits and uncanniness starts to kick in, and then they might add that again, and they might say, well, can you brighten the picture because when it needs to be brighter. Oh yeah, that's great. Look at that. Oh, it looks like she's in a beam of light. We love that. I'm exaggerating, but this is what happens. And again, we've gone from that real nice, subtle, natural finish to, jumps off the page. On a thumbnail, it might look great. You might like YouTube thumbnail or Instagram thumbnail. Oh, that's great. You click on it, and suddenly you go, holy shit, is there a human under there? That skin can't be that flawless. Has that been edited? Look at that bit there. Is it? And of course, I'm over-exaggerating all this, but that's what happens in photography, particularly in fashion, beauty, and those areas. So just be careful that you don't get sucked into doing that for yourself, thinking it's good, or doing it for somebody else because they've asked. Make sure that you're keenly aware of Uncanny Valley tripping you up and making you look like a rank amateur, because you're not, are you? You know more, you know better than that. And you do see some kind of like less knowledgeable photographers who are coming through the ranks, if you like, going, oh wow, that's amazing. Then they make all the same mistakes. But I'm yet to see, outside of probably astrophotography, nebulas and all that other stuff, pictures which I would say stay within the realms of reality that are good. And HDR, the saturation in HDR, I don't mean saturation as in the colour, I mean the amount of it at one point was just like, and I guess it comes hand in hand with the push in AI and a push in things can't be good unless they're edited to death and all that kind of other bullshit, and it kind of like photographers got sucked into it. It's a bit like that old adage, isn't it? Just because you could doesn't mean you should. So I watched it for years, people getting but straight away my kind of brain, my and eye brain thing, my persona went, no, that looked poor. That's rubbish, actually. And I was glad that I did have that because it stopped me from putting out so much drivel. And I did some testing over time. I tested when I was used to use Instagram a lot more, and I was putting out pictures, and I used to put all their filters on. A couple of reasons. One, so they didn't have my original photograph, but two, just to see whether the ones with filters on were liked more than the actual photograph. And at the time, they weren't. I got no more likes on the HDR overdone stuff than I did on the regular pictures. So I think people in the main do understand that photographs should look natural. And natural is something that is kind of contained within our existence, our reality. And I think because those of you that know the show and have listened to me a bit know that I'm a massive proponent of a simulation theory. That's where I think we're all living in a highly sophisticated simulation. We don't know it because, it feels real to us. But my research and my understanding leads me to consider that we do probably live in a simulated reality. And that reality has boundaries. So the things that we think are, universal reality boundaries, they're only universally reality boundaries because of the constraints of the system we live in. So, for example, speed of light is a constraint of our reality. But outside of our reality, speed of light is nothing. So I think within that we're programmed as humans to see and detect things a certain way within those reality boundaries. And I think that's why most of us anyway, can spot a fake or over-edited picture a mile off, because we've all looked at sunsets, we've all looked at people's faces, we've all looked at everyday things millions of times in our lives. So instinctively our consciousness, if you like, knows what they should look like. So when you see a really overly processed picture, your brain should, in the main, I think, kick in and go, nah, I'm not having that. So I think it is really, the recognition of why things are so poor is purely down to the fact that we live in a simulated reality that has boundaries. And when our brain, mind, eye, self, whatever it is that detects the reality, sees things that don't align with what the reality says they should, they're quite easy to notice. And sky photographs are one of the biggest for me. And I'm going to show you some really, really poor examples of some I did on purpose to test this years ago. So this is from 2015. And I did this when I first started my master's degree. Actually, I was scratching around for ideas and things to do. But I was also doing a lot of travelling at that time, travelling to Nottingham back, Manchester and back, and I was seeing lots of sunsets and things like that on my travel, so I'd pull over, get my whatever mobile phone out at the time out, take a picture, and I'd get home later, jump in the bath. While I was in the bath, I'd Instagram some stuff, and I'd just whack loads of stuff on to try and make it look, wow, amazing HDR, when really it was dog shit. And I did that for years. And so I'm just going to show you some of them and see if you can detect why they're actually poor, because they are poor. But you'll see millions of pictures like this around the place, and you'll see them, and you'll continue to see them. So you can see on this one, this is not even one of the worst examples actually. Let me just full screen this so you can see it better. Picture of a sunset. I don't even know where this was, probably over Rotherham I think, looking at it. But when you see a sunset, you will see natural colours, natural as in our reality colours. And when your brain detects anything outside of that, it tends to go, hang on. So if you look at this picture here, it might look slightly different on your screen to mine, but on mine I've got about 7 different shades of blue, which is real. That will happen on a sunset. Particularly when it's cloudy and a bit overcast like this, you'll see variations in colour of blues and reds, orange, yellow. But if you look at the blue on the right hand side in that little bit of what we might call blue sky, you never see a sky that's actually that colour blue, ever. There's far too much cyan going in that for a natural blue sky. And I think the untrained eye might not see that immediately, but if you look at it for long enough and just think to yourself, right, how many sunsets have I seen? Does the sky ever look that deep cyan? And I think you find it doesn't. And then you see it spreads across to the centre, where it becomes a little bit more greeny yellow, and then over to the left where it becomes even more greeny yellow through the over-processing I did. I think most people's eye are looking at that and going, Christ, Lance, what were you doing? And they'd be right, because I was purposely oversaturating it. Unfortunately, I don't have the original to show you the comparison, but trust me, the original was a lot more pasty than that. There was hardly any sky detail in it. It was quite mid-toned. It was quite wishy-washy, if you like. All that heavy cloud, all that heavy contrast, I've processed probably through Snapseed on the phone. 2015, what would that be? Galaxy S8 or something, 7, 8. And Snapseed, I've used that for probably the best part of a decade. So it's probably either Photoshop or Snapseed on the phone to really overprocess it. And I think the kind of only bit I like in this, which is relatively realistic, I think, is that little bit of rolling cloud right in the centre. You can just see the sun is behind it, just off to the right in the centre, and that, not the dark cloud, but the lighter cloud where the highlights peeking through, that's kind of all right. I mean, look how bad that is. Tell how bad camera phones are when you get up close, can you? That bit there is about, I could just about get away with that, but the rest of it is so overprocessed. And another thing you get when you overprocess is where light and darks meet, you get lines. You get like a defined line almost like somebody's pencil lined it on. And if you look at these here, look, you can see, if you look at above this tree, look at the line around the tree. It's kind of, some of that is a natural backlight from the sun, but you would never get that amount of contrast on a normal picture or a well-edited picture. And it's almost like, it almost looks like a painting, doesn't it, rather than a photograph, when you can see the lines everywhere. There's like false lines everywhere defining areas because of the over-processing. And I think some people might say, oh, Lance, that's a beautiful picture, look at the HDR on that. But for me, it's a piece of shit. And, you know, all that kind of stuff, it stayed on my Instagram for a few weeks, then was deleted. And I'd like to say that I probably put it up with a caveat of them just testing, but I don't know if I did or not. My brain will say I did, but I don't know if I actually did or not. That's just one example of piss poor processing, but people love that HDR, high dynamic range, ultra fake, ultra over processed picture because they think it's brilliant and people are going to love them. Look at that genius photographer, look what he can get his camera to do. When in reality, our reality, the brain is going, what the fuck's that? So, calls for entries are probably, outside of the gatekeeper situation, the calls for entries are probably my biggest bugbear in the industry because I fucking hate them. They're an absolute demoralising swizz. All they do is make photographers feel worthless and used, and they make them skint, or they make them more skint. And I mean, once you get past it, you've paid your 15. Let's look at the judges. I mean, I'm not going to single anybody out, but just go on any internet search browser of your choice and search for photography competitions. In fact, let me just do it while we're talking. Let's just have a look. We'll go UK because that's where I'm based. Photography. I could spell it, be dangerous. Competitions UK. So. First one's sponsored, second one is MoMA, then with there's all sorts of ones: Amateur Photographer, British Wildlife, Natural Portrait Gallery, British Photography Awards, Scouty, all those other things. And out of all them, there's probably two that are like what called genuine, and the winners might get a bit of something out of it. And even the ones that even do my fucking boxing even more are Young Photographer of the Year, New Photographer of the Year, Female Photographer of the Year. We're all photographers, we're all humans. Okay, I'll admit, no female photographers made my top 5, but they're in the top 10. And to have competitions where there's no physical advantage of being a man over a woman, photography, why have we got split categories? Most female, if I had 10 female photographers in a room and 10 male, I guarantee you the 10 females will have a better portfolio, more robust, more correct, more creative, more vibrant than the men. But yet we feel that we need to have female and male competitions. Is that because females feel like they don't get a good run against men? It might be. Maybe the widen my position that nobody gets a chance in competitions. Maybe the female aspect of it is they don't feel like they do, so they split it up. So maybe that's it. We can let them off if that's the case. But amateur, young, semi-pro, fucking semi-pro. Really, it should just be: do you earn a living from photography in the main? Is it your main job? Yes. Category. Are you an amateur stroke? Don't make a living from it. Do it for fun. Have the occasional pay gig? Yes. Category. That's probably it. And that's only because people who shoot professionally or commercially do it a lot more and have a lot more advantage to do it, a lot more practice. Should be a little step above. Not always the case, because many, what you might call amateur photographers, are fucking brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So again, that's a bit of a misnomer, isn't it? But I guess somebody who's been taking pictures for 3 weeks going up against somebody who's been taking a picture 30 years is a bit unfair, so there needs to be something there. But again, it just goes on, the list goes on. So you can imagine, can't you, a new photographer going on to the old search engine, typing it and thinking, okay, now there's one there. So then they whittle it down to the ones that kind of do, that are about what they do. So do they do street? Do they do people portraits? Do they do buildings, skies, floors? monkeys, Godzilla, what do they photograph? Then they can probably still have 10 or 20 just in England, competitions they can go for there. How many of them are going to be genuine? How many of them are going to be free? How many of them are going to give the winner some prestige, some oomph, other than a few £100 and nothing? I mentioned on the social media that only 100 people follow. So I'm struggling to say how in the main a photo competition is any use to anybody other than a few very rare winners out of the hundreds of thousands, probably millions of people that enter them. How is any of that any use to anybody other than one or two people? It's not. It's mostly demoralising, mostly costly. It's mostly inhibits you from feeling like you're doing well because you're thinking these judges who this organisation are saying the dogs have judged my work to not be good. I've seen the winner. I don't know what I've done wrong. I don't understand. You don't get feedback, do you? You don't get judges going, excuse me, Mr. Entrant or Mrs. Entrant, 3,493. Your work didn't quite meet the mark because, opinions like arseholes. So I'm lost as to see what the worth is for 100% of people entering them because I don't see any. And yes, some of you can argue that the rare winners, the rare people might go off and do something, but in the main, no. In the main, they might have 5 minutes of fame and then they're back to struggling to get people to see who they are, where they are, what they do, how good they are, all that other stuff. And I think it's not wrong. It's scandalous. It's scamful. It's up in Yorkshire, we call it a swizz. I don't know if you know what that means. The swizz means a scam. It's just a load of bollocks. It's an absolute swizz. Like another example. Chocolate bars used to be this big and 30p. Now they're that big and £5. It's a fucking swizz, isn't it? Photography competitions in the main, generally speaking, are a swizz. They're a scam. They're just a money grab, cash grab for people to make money off unassuming, inexperienced, and quite often people who shouldn't be even entering yet because they're not quite ready to present their work in that forum. But the promise of fame, fortune, sucks them in, and it's almost like they think it's a shortcut to the top. And in my experience, it's very rare that any shortcuts to the top are actually shortcuts to anywhere other than 5 minutes of fame and back to where you were. And sometimes that can taint you as well, can't it? We've all seen it where people, particularly musicians, have 5 minutes of fame and they don't quite do as well as they thought and then done. Same for photography. There's an old saying, and I don't know who said it. At the time I thought it was bollocks, but it's probably true. And the saying is, you're only as good as your last picture. And there's probably some truth in that because if you put out a big pile of bobar's another Yorkshire phrase, by the way, it means shit. If you put out a load of shit, a big piece of steaming bob art, and people see it, how do you come back from that? How do you come back from that judgment, that critique of, that piece of work, bro, this is bob art. It's, musicians go through it, don't they? First single great, second single was shit. First album great, second single bomb, record company dropped them a lot. So it's same across the creative industries. I just think photographers, because we're solo artists, aren't we? We work alone, we ride alone. It's a lot more difficult to come back from a bad set of pictures. And again, that comes back down to a podcast a few back where I talked about selecting and make sure you're only putting out your best work. I mean, I've shown you some of my dog shit pictures on this podcast over the last year. I couldn't give a shit. I'm just happy to be honest and show you my journey. I'm not looking for anybody to go, Lance, off we go. I've made my way in life through many means, and currently, touch wood, I'm lucky enough not to have to rely just on photography for income. But if I had to, I would. So yeah, it bothers me that the industry is not bothered about it and does not really much about it. You see the odd piece where somebody's gone, oh God, it's a lot of shit in it. We need to stop that. But I come at it from this perspective. When I first started in photography 20 years ago, I was coming off the back of some hard times. I couldn't afford to enter competitions that were 10, 15, 20 quid a picture. Even if they were worthy, even if they were prestigious, even if they were going to excel my career to the next level, I couldn't have afforded to do it. So I think, I go back to my youth and I look at where I would have come from. If I'd have left school and gone into photography, for example, I would have been fucked. To even, I don't know how I would have got a camera. I would have probably borrowed something off my granddad or somewhere. There's no way, as a kid in the 80s from a working class background, I could afford to get into photography at any level. Maybe I could have gone to college, borrowed some kit from there, but generally speaking, it wouldn't have happened. So you can imagine, can't you, if you could afford to buy the then photography magazines, or maybe you were looking at one on a newsstand. Fucking newsstand, where am I from? New York. That's the news agents. And you were thinking, photography competition, I'll enter that. Well, I ain't got a camera, and I've got nowhere to get prints done, and I could probably borrow my granddad's point and shoot. What that be? Let's say you get over all that. You get a print made. Where are you going to get 15 quid from to enter? And even looking today, when you look at how the cost of living today is horrendous. It's been done on purpose. You can't argue that that's awesome. I wouldn't make it like it is. You wouldn't make it how it is, but it is how it is. That tells you it's done on purpose. So how's a kid today from a working class background on a council estate or even a lower middle class estate afford to become a photographer and put work into a competition at 15 quid a pop? It's just never going to fucking happen. So it also plays particularly into the higher end competitions, the ones that do claim you're going to get fame, fortune, and people throwing work at you. Apart from the gatekeeping side of it, it's pretty upper class shit, innit? It's the mentality is us and them, or rather them and us. The chances of a kid off a council estate from a working class background, even having his entry looked at, slim. The whole thing is kind of even presented in an upper middle class, high class way, probably to deter people like you from entering, because who do you think you are? And it's quite rare in my experience to come across photographers or companies that what you call working class or even lower middle class, come to that, put competitions out like that aren't sponsored by somebody that doesn't put the money up for it or the prize up for it, and they're free to enter. They tend to be working class endeavours. When you look at the higher end of things, the upper middle class, the higher class, the wealth in the country, the big magazines, the big photo companies, the big chains, if you like to call them, the level is so high to get to them that they're totally missing out probably 80% of the photography or photographers, because they're all lower or working class or lower middle class. So the massive opportunities out there are just out of sight for the regular photographers, and that's done on purpose. That's to keep us down here and them up there. That's all it is. I don't see any other reason why those big competitions, to encourage people to get out of their situations into better situations by charging them 15 quid a picture. It's a fucking piss take. It smacks to me of us and them, of club mentality. It's a big club and you ain't in it. And I've never wanted to be. Once I realised that club existed, I never wanted to be a member of it. I did strive for a few years to get up into that club, but when I realised what it was, I ran the other way. And I guess it depends what you want to get out of your photography or out of your career. Do you want to hang around with people who really feel like that about you? Or do you want to be around people who get you, are on your level and who love what you do because you're good at doing it, not because you came from the right background, the right family, the right estate, the right neck of the woods in the country, the right, north-south thing. I just think that quite obviously photography competitions, the what you might call the higher end photography competitions, are absolutely nailed on 100% scams. And scams which are aimed at people who have got more money than sense and are purposely done to keep people who have got no money but lots of sense away from the opportunities that may be afforded to them and may not, because I'm still yet to see, to be fair, even with the high-end magazines, I'm still yet to see any real evidence that people can attain wow amazing careers off the back of winning one. And like I said, I did check a couple of the recent winners for the most prestigious ones, the ones that are out every year, the National Portrait Prize and all that bollocks, to see if they'd gone on to do wondrous massive things, and I could find very little evidence that any of them have. And that just tells me that another money grab in it. I mean, like I said earlier, if you think about it, some of them will, how can I put this? Quite often, you used to see it back in the day, 20 years ago, you see things in competitions where the competition would say, oh, you own the copyright, but we can do whatever the fuck we want with your picture anyway. And because I've not entered one for years, I don't know whether that's still the same. It probably is. But I mean, who do they think they are? Yeah, you can use the picture to say I won the competition or to show they entered the competition, but you're not fucking using it commercially. But they do. So not only do they get money off people, they get usage rights for free on the tail of what? Having 5 minutes of fame if you're lucky. And quite often competitions are run by, stock photography platforms and brands and PR firms and all those other things as a money making scheme, and they're no good for you. And if all I can teach you in this whole podcast is to think long and hard about not wasting your money on competitions, then I'm happy. If you don't do it, I'm really happy. If you think about not doing it, I'm happy, because I've not seen any evidence yet anywhere in my entire life, certainly the last 20 years of photography, that competitions are anything other than energy sucking, time sucking, money sucking scams. Talk about my biggest current bugbear, which is presets. And they're a bugbear because I see gurus, shall we call them, all over the shop, selling their wares, telling you how good their presets are, why you should use them, and then selling them for 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 quid, whatever it is, only for the unsuspecting photographer to then get home, install their wares, apply them to their pictures, and have their pictures look like dog shit, not like what Guru said they would look like. And then they go back onto Facebook or Insta shit or whatever it is and kick off at said photographer or said Guru because it don't work. And they haven't clocked the fact of why it don't work, and I'll talk about that now. But outside of that, anything you do in photography should be about learning and applying. And if you're using a preset that somebody else has made, how do you apply that learning? It's a little bit like being an artist and sketching an outline and then coming to somebody else and going, fill it in for us. Fill it in and make it look like Van Gogh. And then claiming it's your own. It will never work. It will never be good. You'll never attain the same level of quality as the Guru. Quite simply because the Guru's original pictures that they're applying the filters and presets to are different to yours. Different aesthetically, different technically, different, just different. So you can never apply a preset and get it close to what you think it's going to be because your picture's different to theirs. Plus the presets they're preset for the person that made them for their use. They're not preset for you. And I do think that the gurus know this, but they still go on and sell them because, for want of a better phrase, idiots, I take it back, inexperienced, new people, photographers, were desperate to get good, desperate to get to the point where they think their work's as good as their guru, idol, hero, will take any shortcut given to them, even if it is going to cost them 50 quid a pop. And that's a complete wrong way to approach photography or any art form. And it frustrates me because I see no end of, I'm going to use the term photographer quite loosely there, digital marketer stroke guru selling their wares on social media, pretending that if you buy this preset, your work will look as good as them. Become like me, become a god overnight. Well, it doesn't work like that. And it shouldn't work like that. And presets or actions or whatever you want to call them should only work in your benefit for your reasons. And your reasons should come from your work and how you want your work to look from your own identity. Joe Blogger's work, I love Joe Blogger. Oh, can I get my work to look like him? I know, I'll shoot something of the ilk that he does, portrait, landscape, whack his filters on it, his presets, and suddenly I'll be him. No, you're never going to get there. It's never going to work. Because the chances are that Joe Blogger knows exactly what he did to get his picture from start to finish. He's just giving you the end game, not the middle game. So what did you learn? Somebody says to you, how did you do that shot there? What was the process? And you go, oh, well, I shot it and then just whacked a filter on that I bought from Facebook. Once they've finished laughing the bollocks off at you, they'll say, what did you learn? And you'll say, well, I learnt that I wasted 50 quid because it's dog shit and it don't look anything like Joe Bloggs'. And that's the real truth. And if you think that your work is looking like Joe Bloggs' work, then you just don't know what you're talking about. You've got no real understanding of what Joe Bloggs' work actually is, or what your picture actually is. And you find that a lot, particularly with new photographers, or those who have been at it for a few years but never had an honest critique thrown at them, is that they think their work's good and it's not. They think their work looks like something else and it doesn't. And it's become easier, let me rephrase that, it's become more difficult for inexperienced photographers to understand this, because the gurus they're following, because photography has become difficult to operate in, to make money in, many of these gurus have diversified into doing things like teaching, badly, and selling their presets to help you become like them, but not selling you the knowledge that they've attained to be able to do that. And I started using presets and actions in 2008 after I went to a seminar with Guy Gowan again. I talk about Guy quite a lot because he's the best, still was then, still is now. But his actions, they were different because he would talk you through how the action worked, what it did and why it did it, and why you should use it. And then you could apply it. And it didn't do anything guru-like. It just enabled you to do good quality edits to the same level across a batch of as many pictures as you wanted in a couple of touches, rather than having to go into each picture and individually apply these 5 or 6 steps. So I started using presets, actions if you like, for that. That's 20 years ago, when photography was a lot more commercially viable than it is now in the main. And at that point, the kind of presets were almost like a time saver, more than an aesthetic thing. Although that you did apply your aesthetic to them, but they were built in such a way as they weren't mimicking anybody else. They were just kind of like a quick way of editing your pictures all to the same standard across a big batch of them. That's why I used them. That's why they were good. That's why Guy Gowan did them and gave them out, because that was the point. It was about mimicking and making your work like Guy's work. Guy who didn't have any work to show you. He just showed you the process. So that's, 20 years I've been using presets, if you like, but not to make my work look like somebody else's, but as an aid, as a shortcut to do batches if I'm doing batch work. 9 times out of 10 now, I edit each picture individually. It's very rare that I use batch work now, unless the clients want to see all the images and select them, then I'll do a batch to tidy them up and make them look nice, because who's going to send an unedited picture to a client? I'm not. They're certainly not going to get my raw file. They'll get a somewhat edited, batched JPEG, which has been done through a batch process, so they're all the same. They're all the same colour, same tone, same exposure, all that, for them to make selections. It's quicker than doing them all by hand to send to a client. But I'm not using them for anything else other than that. Certainly not to add an aesthetic that somebody else has to them. Why would I do that? But people do that. So it's kind of like they've become democratized, if you like, or commercialized, monetized, because photographers, using that word loosely, gurus, are struggling to make money like they used to. So they've diversified into other avenues, and one of those other avenues is quite honestly selling shit like this. It grinds my gears, because most photographers or most creatives can't be affording, like, they shouldn't be spending money on, all right, you're free, you can spend your money on what you want, you're free to do what you want any old time, spend your money on what you want, but think about what you could spend that money on instead. And instead of wasting 5, 10, 15, 20 quid on pretty crap presets that don't really learn you anything or teach you anything, or certainly don't improve your work, why don't you save that money and spend it on some proper tuition instead? And again, I'm not just saying spend it on tuition for me, but people like me. And you will get a lot more from that, from earning your stripes through learning process, learning techniques, learning edit techniques, learning how your own batch processors and presets can save you time, effort, and stress, than give it to somebody else who knows your work's never going to look like theirs. Because your work won't look like theirs, because it's not theirs, is it? Your work is your work. Your work was shot on a different time, day, location, person, light, all that. So it doesn't matter how much you apply that preset, it's never going to look like the person who you're trying to emulate's work. It's just not. So yeah, it's a frustration of mine, and you got to ask yourself, I think, have these presets aided your personal development as a photographer? And be real honest with yourself. Look at your off the camera images, look at your presetted images, and ask yourself, how is your work, or how's your process, or how's your photography developed in that space? And I guarantee you can't answer that you've developed as a photographer, as a creative. All you've done is taken somebody else's, sometimes hard work, sometimes not so hard work, applied it to yours, and put it out like you're a genius, when 99% of the stuff I see that's done like that is dog shit. You don't know it because you don't know it yet, but it is. So for me, presets went from being essential tools for photographers to creative crutches. And by creative crutches, I mean to stop learning, to stop you from getting better, to stop you from having to go down a path that might take years to learn process. You've hit the preset shortcut button and think you're a genius, when really you're not. It's just a crutch. You still don't know how it got there, what it means. Why has it got yellow cast on it? Why have you put the left-hand side in shade? Why have you added a lens flare? All those things should come from you, from your own creative position. If your shot is like the one I'm going to show you in a second of Live, and you apply any filter to it or any preset, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to make it look like Joe Blogg's work, or do you just think it'll make your work look better? Because either of those is the complete wrong reason for you to be doing anything with photography. Because photography is probably one of the most, if not one of the most personal, creative experiences you can have. It's rare as a photographer you're in any more than your own company. If you're doing a group shot, fashion or whatever it is, but most genres of photography mean you're on your own creativity, your own inspirations, your own ideas, your own thoughts. Why then are you going to stick somebody else's outcome on the end of it? That's just piss poor practice for me. What happens is people get sucked into it, and then you get people commenting on social media. And I'm not always sure they're genuine commenters either. Quite often they're just bots, aren't they? Going, oh, I bought this and it was brilliant. So everybody's sucked into it. And I've seen them on there. I was looking at one yesterday. A really poor set of presets with thousands of people commenting. So it's easy money. I understand why these gurus are doing it. photography influencer. What the fuck's a photography influencer? Jesus Christ. Anyway, buy into my aesthetic. You love my work, you'll love this preset, buy it, download it, be me. And they get sucked in. So try, if you've been sucked into that preset world, try reinvent yourself. Try and get yourself back to that where you're good because you know you're good. Because you can do, because you've learned. Question I was going to ask you was, do you guys think we can use presets ethically? And I guess it depends what you're doing. If you're just playing at this, if you just want a bit of fun, if you're just trying to get a portfolio to show your grandkids, I guess it doesn't matter, does it? If you're trying to make work to sell to people and show people how good you are and get them to buy you, then using presets is a bit of a fucking cheat, really, isn't it? Because it's not your work. Unless you're saying, well, 50% of it's mine, but 50% of it's Joe Blow because he made all the plugins that I use. People aren't going to buy into you. I think when you get into the realms of digital editing, magazine covers, what else? Games covers, those kind of things. You can probably use some presets, or the designers will use presets to get a certain look. If you've been paid for that, and once you've done your pictures and you've not applied all the stuff, if you give them the pictures, they're going to then do it. That's fine because that's what they bought them for. Wouldn't particularly like it, but that's the world we live in. But you as a photographer shouldn't be like whacking other people's stuff on it thinking it looks good, because it's just detrimental. Detrimental to you, to the industry, to other photographers who are trying to be taken seriously and trying to learn things themselves. I mean, it may be that some of these presets, maybe I'm doing some of them in injustice, maybe they do work in such a way as they explain to you, exactly what you're doing and why it's doing it, and you can go back in and re-edit them, like the ones I use from Guy Gowan, but that's probably pretty rare in my understanding, because I think people want it as a quick fix, don't they? Shoot, computer, preset, output, genius? No, not in this life. So think about it. Have a think about if you're using presets, or if you were thinking about using presets. Are they worth it? Are you learning something? Can you apply it to your knowledge, your workflow, your capacity as a photographer? Are they making you take shortcuts you shouldn't be taking? Are they detrimental to your final output? My experience of seeing them in action, seeing students use them, is they're always detrimental. They always do the opposite of what you think they're actually doing. You think they're making pictures look better and wow, when really they're just going. And anybody worth the salt, magazine editor, photo editor, photographer, designer, can see it and go. They will see it a mile off and they won't buy into it. So if you are using presets in the main, my kind of challenge to you is for the next month, just don't do it. Just step back from the preset. Have a go at finding your own workflow, your own aesthetic, your own end game. And don't try and make it look like the preset was looking. Try and find something else. Get your honesty back. Get yourself back. Become the photographer you should be by not buying into somebody else's aesthetic and somebody else's work. Figure out yourself. Either look back through my editing techniques. Send me a message and ask me, Lance, what could I do with this to improve? I'll give you an honest critique. How can I critique you? Well, I've been a photographer for 20 years working. I've got a master's degree in photography. I'm a fully fledged, bona fide, qualified educator. And I've held more critique sessions with photographers than I care to remember. So I am well qualified in giving critiques. And I will give an honest critique, but I will also give you some advice. All right. So if you're struggling, or you think you're a presetter, or you want to just get some help and get out of that and get into a new vibe, drop me a message. Either message me a comment or drop me an email. I'll respond to you as quick as I can with some advice. Promise that, any of you. But take a month off from it. Step back. Maybe even send me some work and I'll critique it for you. This is what I was doing before, Lance. This is what I'm doing now. What do you think? I'm always happy to help and get involved. So today I thought I'd talk about my experience of elitism in photography. And I've touched on this in a few other episodes previously, but not directly at it like this. And by elitism, I mean the whole industry up to what you might call good money level. The bit where you start to earn money, which is serious, where you start to get gigs, which get you published all the time. Once you hit that level, the whole industry is gate kept by I guess I might call it snobbery. Some people might just call it gatekeeping. Your face doesn't fit, your accent doesn't fit. Some people from that side of the woods would call it sour grapes, or you were never good enough. Well, I know I'm good enough because I've been there and done some of that. But what I wasn't prepared to do was sacrifice everything I wanted to do that. But that's a slightly different story. But my experience of trying to break into the higher echelons has been pretty much one that kind of solidifies my wider understanding of the world, that the working classes are here and everybody else is over here. And the world as a whole is into equality, diversity, and inclusion. Rightly so. We should all be enveloped in that. We should all be welcome. We should all be thriving from whatever background we come from. Whatever we have, right with us, wrong with us, or indifferent with us. As long as we're not hurting anybody, we should all be embraced. But if you're a working class and you're trying to break into music, I mean, you look at some musicians, they come from, what they used to call it, rags to riches. There's some of that. There's the odd person, the odd film star, the odd photographer that comes kind of that route. But generally speaking, you're talking upper middle class, high class people that get into those higher echelons. And I know you'll all throw at me some names of people who've come from the wrong side of the tracks and done good. Yes, there are always exceptions. I'm talking about in the main. I'm talking about the thousands of working class photographers who can't get a gig because of where they're from, how they sound, how they dress, how they look, what their thoughts are, and they don't conform probably. And I've experienced a lot of that in the 20 years that I've been working as a photographer. I suffered it in the early days, I suffered it in the mid days, and I still suffer it today. I still get turned down for jobs today because I'm not from London, or I'm not in New York, or whatever it might be. And it's more than a massive frustration for me. It's bloody obvious that it's done on purpose. I mean, we'll get into the nepotism and bloodlines a bit later on, but just the mere fact that if you sound a bit different, or look a bit different, or just are a bit different, then the equality, diversity, inclusion bullshit falls down because nobody really wants to get into that. They don't really want you to be in a room of, 10 upper class people who speak properly. And somebody like me walks in and, hey, pal, how you doing? You alright, mate? You had a good week? Weather's horrific, innit? Can't fucking breathe. They don't want to hear that because they think I'm below them, I'm thick and I'm a retard, and all that other stuff that I know they think of me and you. And I hear that not just in the photography circles, not even just in the higher end. I hear colleagues say it to me from their day job, try and sound a little different, a bit, fuck off. So, equality, diversity, and inclusion is a great concept in its innocence, but in practice it's very rarely correct or does the right things. It ticks a box and still excludes everybody that falls outside of what you might call societal norms at whatever level you're at. And in photography, and today I'm talking about high-end photography, your newsstand, I said that word last time, didn't I? Newsstand, news agent, because I've been to New York now, you see, I think I've got the lingo. Stuff you see in a news agents, the magazines that you always see. To get into those kind of places, you've got to speak right, act right, do right, be in the right place. And it's frustrated the fuck out of me for 20 years. It still frustrates me. I still hear people telling me these stories now outside of what I know. And it's probably always been there. It probably stems back from when there were peasants and kings, doesn't it? The us and them thing. And I used to let it bother me a lot. I used to really, really let it bother me because as a working class lad from a working class town in a mining community, lastly, where I went to live in Ireland, I wanted to break out of that. I didn't want to just be a kid from a working class background who just stayed there and didn't achieve any of their dreams. And not because there's anything wrong with being working class and living that background. In fact, I live on the same street now that I grew up on, so that tells you that it's more of a mental gymnastics trip than it is a physical. But aspiring to get out of that, I mean, it's an horrible thing initially, isn't it? We all come from different sides of the lines, as they say. and you got to aspire to be better than where you came from. It's just fucking horrible just thinking about that. But I didn't want to be, so I felt like I had a bit of talent. I felt like I had a bit of something else to give to the world other than just drive a van or dig in the mines. I was always that way. And I have done manual labour, so I'm not saying I'm better than anybody. I'm just saying I had a feeling I could get out there. Only then, as I grew up and got a bit older and got a bit of success, to realise that actually the last thing I wanted to fucking do ever in the world was be with them bastards over there. Because A, they were not my kind of people. And by my kind of people, I mean people who do accept you for who you are, whether you're black, white, Indian, straight, gay, religious, not. As long as you're not hurting anybody. My gang accepts anybody. And I quickly found out when I went up the ladder to progress my career, to get out away from the working class situation I would have been in, that I didn't really want to be with those people anyway. And so then you have that conflict of desperately trying to get to a place where you can earn enough money to, at that time it would have been to record songs, put albums out and gig. Never interested in the fame and real fortune, just wanted to be able to sustain that and do it and not have to do it with a day job. And then when I became a photographer as well, I had the same ethos. I wanted to earn a living as a photographer and not have to do another job. And I did that for quite a while. But it's fucking difficult. And it's difficult because people from the other side of the tracks, people from where the grass is greener, look at you like you're a fucking alien. They look at you like you're some kind of disease. And I wonder, there must be many other people out there that outside of my circle of photographic friends and colleagues who have had similar experiences. And I wanted to share some of that with you today, just to let you know, those of you that are coming through particular that might be from a working class or even a middle class background might come up against barriers. They're not even, they're beyond class barriers, because in my experience, where there's a class barrier, more often than not, the class barrier can be broken down. You can push through that. You can convince people to buy into you and believe you, trust you. It's more than that. It's a snobbery which is above class. And it's almost like how can I put it? It's like it is a literal them and us. It's you're not fucking good enough. You don't sound right. You don't look right. So there's absolutely no way your photography, your music, your filmmaking, your poetry, or art, whatever it is, can live up here, because we couldn't put you out there to talk to people. We couldn't have people come and talk to you. And yes, there are small, occasional exceptions to that rule, but in the main, there isn't. And it saddens me when I see students graduate and go and try and go up that path, and our own kids struggle in the creative industries to get past the working class barrier for the same reasons that I struggled and my colleagues struggled and other people I know that weren't even from our location, who weren't even from our county, have struggled. And I could sit here and probably tell you 100 stories about times when I've, as a musician, spoke to somebody about booking a gig or a tour and faced that class, more than class barrier, that, elitism barrier. And I could tell you another 100 stories from when I've been a photographer and come up against that, and I'll expand on that a little bit now. In the last decade, I probably think of 15 or 20 instances where I put myself forward for a job in London, just in London, and had a response something along the lines of, "Oh, great portfolio, I like your work, where are you based?" "Oh, I'm based in Yorkshire, near Sheffield, but got transport, I can come down. Just, let me know if you want to meet on a call, or I'll pop and see you before, so we can see whether we're going to fit." Silence. Tumbleweed. Leave it a few days, pop a message. "Did you get my reply? Ready to go when you are." Silence. They might as well just have sent back an email that said, "Fuck off, you Yorkshire twat." Because that's what they're thinking. They're thinking, God, a big head from Yorkshire. Do we want to have to put up with that? Anybody that knows me knows I'm not like that. I'm the most friendly, welcoming, easygoing guy in any situation. But they get a sense of who you are through your location. They haven't met you. They've not even spoken to me at that point. And just ghost you. They just ghost you. And I would sooner they came back and said, oh, nah, sorry, mate, we don't work with Northerners. Widen the pool. Instead of going in your backyard in Hollywood, swim in your pool. Go to Cleethorpes. Go to Skegness. Go to Blackpool. Go to New Brighton. Go down to Brighton. Go to Southend. Get some real talent. Bring them together and write something fucking new. Or take a picture that looks fucking great, that you can see inspiration for the last 100 years in, but it's fresh. How about doing that? Rather than sticking to your bloodline, to your nepotism, to those who you've got captured because they've been naughty. They won't, will they? Because that's how they live. That's how it goes. Jobs for the boys and girls, jobs for the family, jobs for those in that postcode because they've slipped in there, because somebody's got something on them. That's never going to change. It won't change. All we can do is at our level do the best we can do and be the best we can do and put out the best stuff we can. And if we keep doing that, we'll not go far wrong. We'll have a life, we'll have a career, people will respect us. More than that, though, you'll respect yourself. You'll know you've made that picture out of the goodness of your heart. Your own desires, your own creativity, your own thoughts, your own, your own get up and go, your own love for doing it. And you'll do it well, and you'll be proud of it. I may do a podcast on how we evaluate success at some point. I did write a really big blog on this a few years back, but me, deleted the blog, forgot to save the draft. And it was, I don't know, a couple of thousand words on how you equate success. Depends on where you're from, what your aspirations are. Most people, particularly in that postcode, equate it to money, don't they? You can't possibly be a successful photographer. You're not earning £100,000 a year. Maybe not, but look how fucking good this is to that. So that's my thoughts for today. I just thought I'd slip that out there. Bloodlines, nepotism, and what have we done wrong to get in this club? Come on. And hopefully some of you can align with that and you can go, actually, I've experienced that. That's what I was thinking. Some of you, that idea might be brand new. You might never thought of that before. I'd love to hear your stories. Love to hear whether you've come from a working class background or even a middle class background and managed to make it up that hill and be accepted. I'd love to hear your stories if you have. Pop them below in the comments or drop me an email. I'm always up for a good email and a bit of conversation back and forth. Studio, and I'm absolutely roasting. It's that warm in here, honestly. I'm considering calling Bob Geldof. It's that bad. But I'll soldier through. I'll wipe the sweat off my brow. I'll get through it. It's not as if I'm digging a mine or anything arduous as it. It's just a bit bloody warm. But it's frustrating because I don't work well when I'm warm. So anyway, today I'm going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole because, as you know, if you've watched this podcast for the last year, or even if you just stumbled across it and you've read the bio, you'll know that I'm into some quite bizarre and obscure kind of ideas. One of which is that we actually live in a holographic simulation. And when I say holographic simulation, I don't mean like the kind of thing you see on Star Trek with the holosuite where they can manifest characters and interact with them. I mean a much more sophisticated simulation than that. It's that sophisticated we would never know that we're in it. It feels real to us. The air you breathe, the blood you bleed, the table you knock, all feels real. But actually, it's a simulation. And by simulation, I mean a simulation which is way above what we understand simulations to be. So it's not like a real version of Minecraft, if you like. It's even more sophisticated than that would be. And I think it's been proven, probably beyond a doubt, that it's more likely that we live in a simulation than in what you might call a real reality. And there's many reasons why I feel that. Some of it, I just had a feeling. I always had a feeling that, as John Lennon said, nothing is real. And I kind of always thought that. And over the years, I started looking into stuff. David Icke was one of the ones that I looked at probably first, although he wasn't alone in influencing me to look down those rabbit holes. but certainly the simulation theory, and then people like is he the Rich Terrell, people like that, and Nick Bostrom, with their kind of understanding of how, when you look at our reality, when you look at it in its base form, when you get down to some people call it Planck's constant, which is the smallest measure. Other people might call it pixels. When you get down to that level, quantum level, things make sense if you think about them as a simulated experience rather than a real experience. So that's where my kind of figuring came to. But as I was doing that, when I was writing my academic paper, the paper actually, which I wrote in 2018, is called The Death of the Mechanical Photograph. And the premise of that was that within 40 years, photography as we know it, i.e. a mechanical thing, would no longer exist because people will have either got sucked into virtual realities and no longer really exist in this reality, or they will have gone back to their own base reality by understanding that we're actually not real, and probably more engaged in things like ayahuasca and those kind of chemicals to exist in more harmony with, I guess, for want of a better word, nature, or the base reality which we came from. So as I was thinking about this and researching this and becoming interested in that, and then realising the mainstream was starting to say, hang on a minute, this could be true. Aligned with that, I read The Fall of Sophia, which is on my bookshelf here somewhere, although, there it is. The Fall of Sophia, which is a book all about the Gnostics, Gnosticism, and their idea of how the universe came to be. I'm not religious. I don't hold any religious values. I don't believe in God. But when you read how the Gnostics say we came to be, and then align that with the idea of a simulated reality, the two actually marry up quite nicely. So while I don't follow a religion, I don't believe in any religious texts or any of that kind of caper. You can if you like. It's entirely up to you. Free will. It's not so much that bit of it that excited me. It was hang on a minute, this sounds like a simulation. And so over the years I've become more and more used to the idea that we don't live in a real reality, not a real how we would perceive it from being born, taught things are real, things are solid. More of it's a sophisticated simulation with limits, and those limits or constraints or boundaries, if you like, just like when you play Minecraft or any of those games, they have limits, boundaries, things you can't go past, things you can't go and do, limits to the game. It's like that for us. So one of those limits for me is visuals, how we perceive things visually. And I wondered for years about all this stuff about optical illusions. Optical illusion. I love that phrase. It's an optical illusion. Which is a kind of a human way, our way of saying, I have fucking no idea what that is or why it does it. And if you look at optical illusions and tie them to science and tie them to theories of the people who call themselves experts, although we know, don't we, experts don't exist in any field. They'll tell you a theory about why they think it does it, but they don't really know. And one of the ones that really stands out for me is our earthly companion, the moon. And from a photography perspective, it's always fascinated me, the moon, because you can't get a picture of it like you want. I mean, there's people out there that do, big telescopes, big lenses, all that do. But just bear with me and I'll tell you why you can't. It's a fascinating thing, isn't it, the moon? We've had it all our lives. It's always been there. Although if you read some older African texts, there's a great theory that the moon didn't used to be there, and it was towed into place sometime in the past, and is used for all sorts of nefarious things by some nefarious entities, which again could possibly tie in with the Fall of Sophia and the archonic kind of understanding of what evil, badness is. But that's for another podcast, that's not for this one. But what I wanted to look at today was we see this, the sun and the moon in the sky. We see them all the time. We see them travelling across the sky, see them rising and falling. We see all that. But everything you see within those concepts are optical illusions. So, and I'm not sure either when we were designed or when we were thought about or when we came to be that whoever it was thought we might make a camera that could allow us to zoom in, zoom out, look at things from a different way. Maybe they didn't consider that, but certainly when you're looking at the rising or setting sun or moon against a cityscape or against even the top of a hill with a tree, the moon looks absolutely massive, and then it rises up in the sky a bit and it doesn't, but it's physically the same size. Science experts can't explain that. They've got all sorts of things they think it might be because refraction, diffraction, perception. But I think it's probably just more simple than that. I think it's probably just more to do with the fact that the reality we reside in, the simulation, hasn't accounted for that. Perhaps because it is a bad copy of the original universe, if you like. And I know that might sound a bit out there for a photography podcast, but it's my podcast and I'll talk about it if I fucking want to. So it's quite easy for me to look at optical illusions like that in photography and say, well, given the constraints of our reality, are you surprised that that's all you see? You know, you look at the limitations of the human eye when we're looking at an horizon or we're looking at, I don't know, let's say a train track going away from us, and it starts off this big and the end of the line is that big. But if you look at the slats that go across the middle of it as they're going away, they look like they're getting smaller, but when you measure them, they're actually the same size. It's just a perception limitation on us. So, as a photographer, you're trying to take a picture of something that you've seen. Let's use the moon as an example again. And you can't get the perception that you've seen because there's an optical illusion there. And whether you magnify that with your camera or not might actually add to that misconception or that misunderstanding or that misalignment of it. It may add or subtract from it depending on what lens you're using, where you stood, that kind of stuff. So photography, I think, is kind of a bit battered by optical illusions because we want to represent what we've seen. We want to show what we've seen. We want to give it a good attempt to photograph and represent what we actually saw and felt. And it's difficult when you're faced with optical illusions, which are, for all intents and purposes, none of our making, and we can't do anything about them. We just have to accept them. And there are very few things, aren't there, in life, particularly with, you know, all the gurus there nowadays, that we don't have a definitive answer for why the moon looks massive in the sky, but then it doesn't. Or when the sun looks massive in the sky, or then it doesn't. Or then you point a zoom lens or you point a telescopic lens at the moon or the sun, and it still doesn't look as big as what it looks. Even through magnification, it's still not quite what you expected it to be. And I've done quite a lot of moon gazing, a lot of sun gazing, a lot of star gazing, and just looking at my pictures that I just dragged a few across to talk about optical illusions. I mean, this one here of the sun setting, for example. The sun looks tiny, and it looks 95 million miles away. But on another day, on another space, that sun would look massive on the horizon and look like it's about 30 miles away. And I don't disagree necessarily with some of the conclusions that are made by experts, but I think it's just a simpler answer that it's because we live in a simulation, and the simulation doesn't allow for certain things because of its limits. Speed of light being another one. Speed of light is not a constant in the universe. It's not the fastest thing in the universe. It's just the fastest thing in our reality. It's the fastest we can travel in our constraints in the Minecraft that we live in. That's the limit. And I came across a shot that I uploaded to Instagram a few years ago, and that flagged my account up as not safe, and they actually barred that account from ever running adverts or doing anything because I was posting nude, or not just strictly nude, but what they classed as inappropriate images for Instagram. Now, anybody that's followed my career for ages knows I used to shoot glamour back in the day, Nuts, Zoo, FHM, that kind of stuff. I don't hold any, I don't have any regrets for doing that. It was brilliant at the time. In my view, it should still be going. People should be able to do that kind of thing, consenting adults. I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But generally speaking, I started my career doing glamour and progressed through to fashion portrait and stuff, which I call more creative, more difficult to create, because it's not just some lights, beautiful girl. So that's why I kind of stayed away from it, not because I didn't like it or didn't enjoy it, but because I found fashion portrait and beauty more interesting creatively. But I still shot what you might call glamorous stuff within that. I still did underwear and bikini work, lingerie, that kind of stuff, even a bit of boudoir. I've even done fine art nude. So I've got that kind of stuff in my catalogue, but the picture I'm talking about, which I'll put on screen in a sec, was nothing like that. It was nothing like, well, I think, nothing like what I should have been. I don't know, banned's not the right word, because I wasn't kicked off Instagram, but my account was locked from running adverts or doing anything of any worth. Pretty much killed the account at that point. And I was just showing some fashion work. I mean, it is fashion work, kind of artistic fashion, but you'll see in a minute why it wasn't nude. And it didn't shock me. It pissed me off because I'd started to rebuild my brand, if you like. And what happened is I've been on social media like most people for most of the time since it was around. But around, I don't know, when would it have been? 2021, mid 2021, maybe towards 2022. I was so pissed off with the censorship going everywhere. I was so just fucking utterly pissed off with it. Leaning out of overreach from governments and overreach from extreme liberals. I just shut them down. I walked away from them. I just thought, what's the point? I can't do anything. I can't get any traction because everything's banned. You couldn't do anything for a period. So I kind of wiped my accounts out, and then once I kind of felt the tide was changing a little bit, and I wanted to try and maybe appeal to a newer audience, get my work back out a little bit more, I regrouped and got the social media going again. But within, I don't know what it would have been, within probably 3 or 4 weeks of doing that, my account was, for all intents and purposes, shadow banned because of this image I'll show in a sec. But not only that, funnily enough, around the same time, I decided to give TikTok a go, just because I heard a lot of hullabaloo about it's good for pointing people to your website and other places. So I used a similar, not the same image, I used a collage of images in like a real format, like a video format of pictures. Just the same stuff, fashion, lingerie, underwear, fully clothed fashion, headshots, that kind of stuff. And within about 10 minutes of posting that on TikTok, I was banned from there as well. So the comeback wasn't that good, but it just reminded me of the heightened censorship, and it hadn't changed at all. So I have a love-hate relationship with social media, more hate than love. And I understand some censorships. I understand, obviously, kids. We don't want kids seeing stuff like that. But for me, more of that is about parental guidance and parental responsibility. And because much of that was taken off you by the state and handed to teachers horrendously, kids now find they're doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing. Parents don't know. Purposely done, in my view. It's done to make kids confused and make kids not be kids anymore, make them grow up too quick. All that stuff is done on purpose. It's not for this podcast. I might talk about it somewhere else, but it's done on purpose, in my view. And the censorship is just another way of kind of confusing everybody and making everybody feel like they don't have freedom to do anything. Again, that's done on purpose. And without getting into politics and that stuff, the kind of left-leaning, the minority left-leaning people that run things skewed what people really think. And I know that because I talk to people in the real world that work in industry, that work in the creative sphere. And trust me, 9.9% of 9.9 out of 10 of the people don't want this censorship at all. They want people to be able to create and be free. But that's another discussion. So I'll just dig out the picture which I'm talking about, which hopefully I'll be able to put my hand on pretty quickly because I was looking at it the other day. And then I'm just going to go back and look at the timeline and how we ended up in such a pickle. And it must be frustrating more so for people that photograph what you might call artistic nudity or artistic feminine form, because it's predominantly women that were picked on here. Women who were filtered out as being something wrong to see, for another human to see another human's bare breasts. I mean, how did we get here? How did we evolve by hiding that stuff? And again, I'm not saying that we should have it plastered all over everywhere, but it certainly shouldn't be censored to the degree that it actually is. And so you can see the picture on screen now. This is the picture that was censored on Instagram as being inappropriate and got my account banned, so I could no longer use it to advertise to. I mean, I was going to pay for the advertisement. I was going to use it as this was one of many pictures I was using as a vehicle to show my work, to kind of give my public profile a lift, and it was instantly banned, and there's no longer on that account allowed to do any adverts. And they have an appeal system on there, and the appeal system is a bit like when you ring somebody to make a complaint and they keep you on hold that long, and they make you go through so many hoops that by the time you get anywhere, you just had enough of it, you give up. Well, the complaint system or the challenge system on Instagram, Facebook, and all those other meta platforms is pointless, because it's all, even then it was kind of semi-AI, but now it's done by Autobots. And just simply, the link never works. So you go click, I want to challenge this, and it goes around in circles. It never works. You never get to a point where you've spoken to somebody who can understand that that's not nudity, that's not extreme, it's not porn, it's not any of those things. It's just a girl in a bikini with some oil to shine it, make it shiny. It's a piece of creative fashion art. It's not, but I never got to that point. So for those that might follow me on social media, my account used to be called Burkitt Photo. And because of this, I changed it to Lance Burkitt, and somewhat to align more with what I'm doing. I started the podcast and all that stuff, but the Burkitt Photo account is dead in the water, because I can't do anything with it. So I then had to go and I had to then restart a Facebook page, because the Burkitt Photo Instagram was attached to that. And any time I tried to do it on the Burkitt Photo on Facebook, it would. So you can't, because it's and it's just like nightmare. And it's done on purpose. It's done to kind of control. It's all a form of control, all of it. And that pisses me off and frustrates me, because what happened is people in these positions of power that are making these decisions have been so wholly sucked into left-leaning ideologies that they don't understand or can't comprehend creative art. They go from total unawareness to decision with no consideration, no real thought, no adult grown-up thinking, no conversation. Slap a tag on something that they don't understand, and it's dead in the water. It doesn't go anywhere. And all the companies, well, probably Twitter until Elon Musk took it over, was definitely like that. Not so much now, although it still does do things that he claims it doesn't. And how anybody can construe that picture on screen as being offensive or any of those things that the meta description said it was, why my account got locked. I didn't get kicked out of it. I could still use it. I just couldn't do anything with it. It was, totally shadow banned and dead in the water, so it was pointless. Because of that picture. It violated guidelines. And if you go on to Instagram now, you can see lots of different people posting holiday snaps where they're in a lot less clothes than that, in a lot more precarious positions than that. Not being flagged up, but for some reason this was flagged up. Whoever it was on that day, the rather left-leaning young adult on that day will have seen it and be completely offended by it and hit the button, and that was the end of that. And that's the kind of censorship which is wrong. I don't believe we live in a democracy. We're told we live in a democracy, but there's nothing democratic about any of this process, is there? It's opinion, and if your opinion is extreme one way or the other, then the other person in the argument doesn't stand a chance, and that's how it was there. Censorship gets worse, and we're supposed to live in a more accepting society. We're 21st century now. If you look back at certainly the last 100, 150 years and how people were downtrodden and things were, kind of like the us and them. It's no better now. We're just as us and them now. It's just disguised a bit better. Your freedoms are disguised, or your lack of freedoms are disguised better because you think you've got some, but then you try and do something that you really want to do and you quickly realise you've got no freedom at all. Hence, pointing a picture of a beautiful female, beautifully lit, or even badly lit, even if you're a crap photographer. So what? Your intentions are good, trying to create something nice and exciting, just like painters used to do in the past. Why are we censoring it? Because some people might get upset. Well, did-ums. My Linford Christie days are behind me, so I can't keep up with him if he decides to run off. But while we were there, on this one particular day, it's probably the day we came back maybe, I'll just find the folder and I'll show you a wide shot of what I'm talking about. So we were on the beach a lot, and there's not that many people around. It's not quite, school hasn't finished yet in the UK. Schools were still in school then. The holidays hadn't started, so there wasn't that many people around. But there was... Oh, there it is. I'll put it in the travel folder. There was a few people kicking around the beach, but this one particular day there was there was a party of kids had come to the coast, obviously, for the day, and they were, I don't know, aged from about 5 up to maybe 12 or 13, and they were playing on the beach, playing games. And I was kind of watching the whole atmosphere and walking the dogs and taking pictures of the sea and the sky and, the landscapey kind of stuff. And I thought to myself, this would make great photographing these kids at play, because they were so happy, they were just completely engrossed in what they were doing. It would have made for great photographs, either for the school they come from, or just for them, for the parents, or for, I don't know, let's say if you got the job through an advertising agent making an ad for Jet or whatever it might be. But I was there on my camera and I thought, I self-censored myself, and it's something I don't very often do, and I censored myself because I immediately think, people are going to think, what the fuck's that guy with a camera doing, photographing kids? And it's a ludicrous thing to have to think, isn't it? Because all I was thinking was these would be great pictures for everybody to look at. These kids having a great time. Playing football, playing squash, playing TIG, all that stuff. And I thought, creatively, it would make some great pictures. But I stopped myself from doing it because of that. Now, ethically, morally, you can argue the toss all day as to whether that's right or wrong to do it. What I didn't want to do is put myself in a situation where I got tagged or got accused or any of those other things, which often happens even when you're with your own kids in a park and you get a camera out. People look, oh, pedo, that mentality. So I stopped myself from doing it, and it made me feel sad that we live in a world where we automatically assume somebody with a camera might be a bad one. And I guess you could argue, couldn't you? Somebody might say, well, what do you want to put loads of photos of kids for? But that's their mentality, not mine. My mentality is, these kids are kids, yes, but they're just humans. They're along with parents and carers. I'm a parent and a carer. I'm DBS checked up to the hilt for all that's worth. But I'm not thinking in those terms. I'm not thinking in nefarious terms. I'm just thinking these would make really good creative photographs. Probably could have even got the dogs involved. It would have been great. But I stopped myself because I'm long enough in the tooth to understand what could happen if I would have gone, even if I'd have gone and said to the parents or the teachers, well, could I take some pictures? It's great. But it just made me think, we've got to, rightly or wrongly, we look at things in a strange way, particularly in the UK. But there's people with mobile phones everywhere doing it, and nobody tends to bat an eyelid at that. There were people there with them taking pictures on their phones. But anyway, so linking that to the homeless thing, I will in a minute, I promise. So as we were walking back up the hill, I took some wide shots of of the bay, and I don't even know if I edited them. I probably didn't. I might not even be able to. If I can't like quickly find them, I'll put it in on the edit. But I took a wide shot, and the kids I think are in the wide shot. That you can't really see that they're kids, but they're there. But it's just a wide shot of the beach. Oh no, that was they were filming an advert while we were there, which, strangely enough, cameras all over the place. I don't know if this was the same day. Yeah, you can see them there in the distance. There's the kids playing and having a great time. So, no real ethical, moral dilemma on that shot, because it's a shot of the coast and kids just happen to be in it. You can't identify anybody. There's no shots that you wouldn't really want to be in there. There's nothing people can construe from it, but they're in the shot. And the only difference is distance, I guess. But I self-censored myself then, and that kind of experience reminded me that over the last, 10, 12 years, I haven't purposely photographed the homeless. I've never gone out purposely to go, oh, there's some homeless people, I'm going to photograph them. That's never been my bag. But when me and Kirsty have been in cities, and I've been taking pictures of the cities, I've always come across homeless people. And some, as it turns out, aren't homeless and are just kind of like swinging the lead. But it made me think, maybe I should do a podcast about the ethics and morality, that word, about photographing the homeless on the street, because although I've got a lot of pictures of the homeless and I've taken a lot of pictures of the homeless, I've never done anything with them. Now, I always had this kind of like, I don't know how to put it, I've always had like an idea that I might, started off thinking, I'm collecting all these pictures, I'm doing street photography. Every city, every place we go to, I take my camera and I do street photography because I love it, as you know. But there's always homeless people there. So every city I've been in, every town probably I've been in the last 10, 12 years, I've photographed somebody homeless. Not intentionally, just come across them, took the picture. More often than not, I do it kind of from the hip like I always do. I don't go up and ask them, although I did on one occasion, and I'll talk about that in a sec. Two occasions actually, if I count a recent occasion. But mostly it's just me taking pictures of the situation I come across. If I see a handbag on the floor, stop and take a picture of it. If I see a homeless person, I won't go up and get in their face and go, how'd you get here, mate? I'll just take a discreet picture as I pass, in my kind of style. Two reasons for that. One, as you know, I'm a yellow belly street photographer. I don't have the balls to go up to people. But two, I don't want to upset them. I don't want to ruin their day. So then that kind of leads back, doesn't it, to, well, what's the point in taking a fucking picture then, dipshit, if you're not going to do anything with it, if you don't want to like have that interaction, what you're doing. So my kind of justification over the years is, well, at some point I'm going to do an exhibition, or I'm going to do a book, or I'm going to make a documentary or something and stick all these pictures in it and go, look how fucking great Lance is. But that's kind of sat in my brain for years and years and years, and to the point where I've never done anything with it, and I probably never will, because I find it difficult to get past that exploitation of them. So I might justify it by going, I'm going to do an exhibition of these homeless people I photographed in cities. I don't know the names. I don't know if they're still homeless. I don't know if they're still alive. I don't know who they are, but I'm not going to exploit them, because anything I make out of this exhibition, I'm going to give it to the homeless. And I've thought about that a lot over the years. But what the fuck is that? What is that? Let's say I do an exhibition in Rotherham and I go, these are the pictures I've photographed of people in Rotherham and Sheffield, Doncaster, homeless in the last decade. Aren't I fucking great? Aren't I a good photographer? Let's say I earn 100 quid. Let's say I raise 1,000 quid and I go up to some homeless charity and go, there you go, there's 1,000 quid for my exploitation of the homeless over the last decade. What does that do for them, and what does it do for me? What does it actually do? What does it achieve? And I think, if I really cared that much and I really gave a shit that much, I'd just go and get £1,000 and give it to them, wouldn't I? The photograph wouldn't have to happen. The vehicle of the photograph exhibition or book or whatever doesn't have to happen. The me doing the exhibition for money is me kind of softening the blow to myself, making myself feel better about doing it because I've earned some money for the charity. And I'm not entirely sure that that's not just morally fucking bankrupt, doing that. And I have kind of battled with that. And I've had conversations with students about this. I've had conversations with colleagues about it, other photographers, other artists, other people who've done similar things. And I still don't have the answer. I have feelings, I have opinions, I have debates with myself about it quite a lot, but I still don't have an answer. But that leads me back to this picture I'll show you now. So I didn't really start doing street photography or city photography until me and Kirsty started going to cities quite a bit, and Liverpool was the first one I went to. Coincidentally, the first year after we started doing that, I started my master's degree, and while I was doing the first bit of my master's degree, I was kind of figuring out what my project was going to be, and I decided quite early on I was not going to shoot it on digital. I was going to relearn film, shoot everything on film, A, to get myself to a point where I was good at it again, but B, because it's so much more difficult and it might make me think a bit. So I had a Pentax K1000, a couple of rolls of Tri-X film, and went out into Sheffield, which is quite close to where I live in Rotherham, and had a walk around the town, city, and come across a few homeless people while I was out and about there. But one person I did come across, which kind of, it was a strange feeling situation. I'm going to show you this, and I'm going to show it on screen. I'm going to tell you why I'm showing it you. And bear in mind, this has never been published, although I think I maybe did at one point sometime a few years ago put a web page together on my website to kind of talk about this, but I left it for a couple of days and took it down because I felt completely uncomfortable doing it. So this guy, really nice guy, he was selling the big issue on, I think it's on Pond Street in Sheffield. And what struck me initially was, we'll talk about in a sec, the kind of composition where he was stood and the signage and stuff. But as I approached him, I was doing my yellow belly approach. I got my camera on a strap down my side. I was going to do a sneaky little, like this little gizmo here. It's kind of like a Pentax copy. So I got my camera and I was giving it a bit like, shan't I? Bear in mind everything's manual. I had no idea if it was even remotely in focus or anything. But I stopped myself doing that. I stopped myself at that point doing it. I didn't actually do that. I stood and watched him for a second and watched him sell a couple of magazines. And then he clocked me and he looked at me and smiled. And I thought, you're a fucking human being, Lance, and you claim to be a really approachable, likeable, amiable kind of guy. Go and speak to him. So I just walked over to him and said, hi mate, are you alright? Lovely dog. Been a lover of dogs. Dogs are always a good kind of like thing to use to introduce people. I said to him, if I buy a copy of your magazine, could I take some pictures of you? And he said, you can take some pictures anyway. I said, no, let me buy a copy of your big issue and then I'll take a few pictures and I'll feel, a little less guilty for, I don't want you to feel like I'm kind of exploiting you. He said, I don't, mate, you can take pictures. So I don't know why. I think I did this to try and make myself feel better. I gave him the money for the magazine, £4 or whatever it was, and he gave him the magazine, and I gave it him back. And I said, no, you keep it, mate. Keep the money. That's fine. That's fine. If I can just take your picture. He's like, take my picture, mate. It's all right. He said, thank you for giving him the magazine back so he could resell it. And so then I took this picture and a few other pictures on the street, for my £4. And it was only later when I thought about what I'd done. And I thought, what a wank thing to do. It was nothing to do with him. It was nothing to do with how it made him feel. It was all about making myself feel better. And I look back now, and he didn't act it, he didn't say it, and he didn't kind of come across it. But I think it must have felt really patronising for me to go, well, I can afford to give £4, mate. I'll give £4 and keep your magazine. Keep your fucking poxy magazine. Which I didn't say that, but I thought it must have felt that way. And I thought I should have just took the fucking magazine, shouldn't I? It would have been a more clear, transparent, and more fair and more honest transaction if I'd taken the magazine. And that's kind of bothered me a bit over the years. But hopefully he didn't take offence to it, and hopefully he resold the magazine and made a few extra quid. That makes me feel better. It doesn't make him feel any fucking better, does it? So even now, 10 years on, I'm thinking about me, not him. But it started me on the journey of thinking about, what the fuck are you doing, going to photograph homeless? But within that, all that guilt and that anguish and that fucking confliction, it's never stopped me doing it. And I think that speaks volumes about myself and other people who shoot on the street in terms of why we're really doing these things. So, be interesting to see what you guys think about those kind of moral dilemmas, particularly in a situation like this. Drop a comment below or ping me an email if you don't want to go public and say what you think about it. I'm highly conflicted about it today, but I'm addicted. I can't stop. That says more about me than them. So anyway, the photograph in question here, the kind of juxtaposition of him and his dog and his homelessness against a shop lease, which you know and I know, that shop lease even 10 years ago was probably worth 30 or 40,000 quid a year. And this poor guy, I don't know from Adam, but most people I speak to who are homeless or have been homeless or about to be made homeless tend to come from a couple of different camps, but more often than not, it's kind of like situations of life that have flared up and they've gone out of control. Very rarely do people make themselves homeless on purpose. Some do. And it has been pointed out to me over the years, particularly in the bigger cities, and I particularly noticed it myself in Athens, how there's a lot of charlatans out there as well, so you have to be very careful about accepting people for what they appear to be. But this guy was clearly genuinely homeless with his doggies, and I just thought that one frame there with the life going on around him and his dogs and the shop lease available, and it's almost like he's invisible, isn't he? Do you know what I mean? We've got a human being in dire straits, in need of help and assistance and care, outside a shop that's worth probably millions of pounds, actually, the building, that's for rent, then people only bother about the rent. They're not bothered about him. And that's not their fault per se. But the society we live in, it's almost like I could erase him out of the shot and it wouldn't make any difference to anybody. But he's there. He's alive. He's a human. He's there. And in my mind, it doesn't matter how he ended up there. There should be a better way of helping, assisting, making things better for everybody. And that might sound like a bit of a communist or a bit of a socialist kind of thing, but I'm a socialist at heart, and I don't mean a champagne socialist. I don't mean a fucking trio-game wishy-washy woke, let everybody do what they want, woke, socialist. I mean a real socialist. And I photographically, I'm shooting 35mm and it's in focus. That's a big fucking start for me. Exposure's good. Obviously it's a scan, digital scan. It's not been, I might have just tweaked the shadows a bit when I scanned it, but generally speaking it's how it was. So I was pleased with the shot, pleased with the composition, pleased with the content of it, although I would prefer never to have to photograph homeless people because there shouldn't be anybody homeless, should there? But I took a series as I went past him, and again, this is not quite as good because there's a bit of a woman just walking out of shot, and I'm going to kind of chop the woman in half at the ATM machine. This would have been better if I'd have kind of cropped it that way, maybe a little bit more, and I could have seen the whole woman there. But again, even the story, cash machine, woman getting cash, big issue still. And I know they kind of stand in strategic places to make sure they can sell magazines and people have got money. That I get that, but it's still that capitalist bastard world we live in, where potentially in that machine on the wall there's all the money in the world, and that guy's having to sell a magazine just to have somewhere to stay tonight, or maybe not even have somewhere to stay, somewhere to eat. And then even now in today's kind of society, or today's kind of dilemmas, this SWFC, Sheffield Wednesday Football Club moniker on the sign there, that's kind of quite poignant because they're about to go into the shitter, aren't they? Which again is another fucking capitalist, poorly run kind of issue, but it's strange how things happen in life. And again, this one was kind of, I liked it because the businessman walking past him, and I'm going to say the businessman way out of caring the world, but he's probably got the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's probably, I don't know, sales exec or some shit, and he's out for his lunch and he's thinking, how the fuck am I going to make them sales this week? Different stresses, different things. Lady at the ATM still. People passing by, people at the bus stop. They've all got lives, there's all stories going on, everybody's got a story. But focus on the homeless guy, counting his change, trying to sell a magazine to have a roof over his head or a bite to eat tonight. And the moral dilemma that comes with that sits with me heavily now. And this is the first time I've really shown and spoken about it. And I kind of hope, maybe I should have anonymised the city when I said it. Maybe I shouldn't have said it was Sheffield. Maybe I'll do that for the rest. But it's difficult for me to show and talk about because I have that conflicted feeling of exploitation. My desire is not to exploit anybody. My desire is to show the world that this shit happens and this shit's in every city through, I hope, a decent photograph of it, not just a... You know, you see some celebrities or you see some people that go up to an homeless people and they're like, oh, look at me giving the homeless some money. Yeah, look at me, I've got my phone, take a picture, you know. That's completely morally bankrupt. It's not me, that's not what I've never done that. But by the same token, I think it's just, I'm still exploiting them just a different way. And that's kind of how I felt about it. And that was another guy as I was walking out of Sheffield with his cup for collecting. And I'm not going to mention the city in case this guy's still around up there. Hopefully he's not. Hopefully he got himself sorted. Hopefully he got himself, you know, back off the street and into a better way of living. But this was 2015-ish, I think, around Christmas time, and I only took this one shot, and you can tell it's a rushed shot because it's slightly blurred, and that's not because of the shutter speed or because the camera wasn't working. It's because I wasn't quite in focus and I was moving. And as soon as he saw me take the picture, he went fucking ballistic at me. Started shouting abuse at me and Kirsty, and we kind of like hurried off pretty quickly. And I felt bad about it, but at the same time I was glad I got the shot because he was a real interesting character who's clearly got a story, who's clearly, you know, in some kind of distress. And he's got the prick like me taking his photograph without speaking to him, without offering him anything. But does that make any difference? Should I have photographed him? And sometimes I fall back on that, but there's cameras everywhere, and there is. And there was 2 or 3 cameras looking at him from the buildings opposite and whatever. But is that the same? It's a device taking pictures of people without their permission. We have to suck it up, don't we? Is that any different? Is that different to me getting another device and taking a picture for my own benefit, my own ego, whatever it is? I'm not so sure it is any different. But still, that guy made me know that he wasn't happy I'd taken his pictures and he was abusing, I'll make you fucking delete them and all that. So I didn't confront him, I didn't turn around, I just walked off. Thanks for tuning into the Lance Burkitt Encounter today. I really do appreciate you spending some time with me here in the world of photography, education and reality. If you enjoyed the episode and feel like you learned a bit of something, do me a favour, like, subscribe and share the channel with somebody you feel really needs to hear it. And if you're able to, and if you'd like to, please head over to lanceburkitt.com/shop and treat yourself to some of the Lance Burkitt Encounter merchandise. After all, that's how we're going to keep the channel and the podcast alive and completely independent. Until next time, keep shooting with purpose and stay true to yourselves. Cheers.
You won't believe, yeah, I can't get you out my life.